Imagine a garden where nothing grows downward. Flowers bloom toward the sky. Trees refuse to touch the ground. Even falling leaves stop midway, hanging silently in the air. Hidden beyond every map, surrounded by mountains that satellites refuse to photograph, lies the world's strangest botanical sanctuary. People travel thousands of miles hoping to harvest miracle plants, but no one notices. The garden has never been growing for them. It has been growing for the planet. The sanctuary had no official name. Governments denied its existence. Maps labeled the valley as empty wilderness. Yet every year, a handful of wealthy collectors, desperate patients, scientists, and fortune seekers somehow found their way here. They all came searching for one thing: miracle harvests, plants said to heal incurable diseases, fruits that could erase aging, seeds capable of producing limitless energy. At least, that's what the stories promised. Every visitor believed the sanctuary belonged to someone powerful. They imagined billionaires, secret governments, ancient organizations. Instead, they met Elias, a quiet old gardener, weathered hands, worn boots, clothes stained with decades of soil. He spoke softly, rarely smiled, never explained the plants, and every single visitor underestimated him. They saw an old man. They never realized he had been protecting the garden for nearly 60 years. Visitors searched for fruit, but the garden had none. Every plant broke the laws of nature. Vines climbed through empty air. Roots floated like jellyfish beneath the soil. Trees leaned sideways, unsupported. Tiny flowers orbited larger ones. Seeds hovered above their branches, refusing to fall. Gravity itself seemed confused, yet somehow, every plant remained perfectly healthy. Then came harvest day. Everyone expected fruit. Instead, Elias collected light. Tiny glowing particles drifted from every leaf. They gathered inside crystal bottles. Visitors laughed. They had traveled across continents for glowing dust. Yet no one noticed. The plants always produced exactly enough, never more, never less, as though they knew precisely what was needed. One autumn morning, Elias noticed something impossible. The plants had moved, not grown, not spread. Moved. Entire clusters had changed position overnight. Floating vines now pointed north. Trees leaned toward distant mountains. Flowers formed perfect circles. Elias checked every path. No footprints, no broken stems, no sign anyone had entered. The garden had rearranged itself. Elias climbed the sanctuary's highest watchtower. Looking down, he froze. Every pathway, every tree, every floating vine had become part of something enormous, a perfect hexagon. Too large to understand from the ground, too precise to happen by chance. And then, one flower slowly rotated, followed by another, then hundreds more. The entire sanctuary had begun drawing. But drawing what? Elias didn't know, yet somewhere, high above Earth, someone, or something, already could. Elias barely slept that night. Before sunrise, he climbed the watchtower again, expecting the garden to have returned to normal. Instead, the pattern had changed. The perfect hexagon had stretched into dozens of interconnected shapes. Lines of silver vines linked floating trees. Rings of luminous flowers had expanded. Even the hovering seeds had shifted into precise positions. Whatever force guided the sanctuary, it wasn't finished. By midday, the sanctuary welcomed another group of visitors. They came carrying cameras, drones, and expensive scientific equipment. Most were disappointed. There were no miracle fruits, no glowing apples, no magical flowers to take home. Yet, every instrument they carried began malfunctioning. Compasses spun endlessly. GPS signals vanished. Drone cameras glitched into static whenever they flew above the garden. Only the human eye could still see clearly. Inside his small wooden cottage, Elias unlocked a chest that had remained closed for decades. Inside were journals, not his own. They belonged to every gardener before him, generation after generation. Each caretaker had documented strange events, floating forests, silent earthquakes, lights beneath the soil, and every 63 years, one identical sentence appeared, written in different handwriting, across nearly 400 years. The garden has begun speaking again. Behind the oldest greenhouse, Elias found something he had never noticed before, a staircase, buried beneath moss. It descended deep into the mountain. At the bottom, he entered a forgotten chamber. It wasn't a laboratory, nor a temple. It was an observatory, but instead of telescopes pointing toward the stars, every instrument pointed downward toward the Earth itself. That evening, hundreds of kilometers away, an Earth-observing satellite completed another orbit. An analyst noticed something unusual, a bright geometric figure, stretching across an isolated valley. Impossible. Yesterday, it wasn't there. Within hours, the image reached research centers around the world. Nobody knew what they were seeing. Some believed it was an unknown civilization. Others suspected an elaborate hoax. But one scientist whispered, "It looks like a circuit." Back inside the observatory, Elias activated an ancient mechanical projector. Dust filled the air. Gears slowly turned. Then, a beam of light illuminated the stone ceiling. It displayed the same geometric pattern, exactly as the plants were forming it today. The projection was dated 8,000 years ago, long before cities, long before written language, long before anyone should have known what satellites would someday see from orbit. Elias stared in silence. The garden wasn't inventing something new. It was repeating a message that had been sent thousands of years before humanity was ready to read it. And outside, every floating flower turned toward the night sky. At dawn, Elias climbed the watchtower expecting to find the sanctuary unchanged. Instead, the valley had transformed overnight. The glowing hexagon he had seen the previous evening had vanished. In its place, thousands of gravity-defying plants floated into entirely new formations. Silent vines stretched across open air. Flowers drifted into perfect spirals, and towering trees leaned toward the horizon, as though responding to an invisible command. Nothing in the garden was growing anymore. It was moving with purpose. Elias carefully compared today's arrangement with the sketches he had made yesterday. Every flower, every floating branch, every luminous vine had shifted into precise new positions. It wasn't random evolution. It resembled an enormous language being written across the valley. Hours later, satellites captured another image from orbit. When scientists layered the photographs together, the symbols connected perfectly, like consecutive frames of a message that was still being written, one day at a time. Thousands of miles away, inside the Global Seismic Monitoring Center, an unexpected anomaly appeared on dozens of screens. Tiny tremors were rippling through Earth's crust, not powerful enough to be felt, but too precise to ignore. Every pulse arrived at perfectly measured intervals, almost like the steady beat of a living heart. Curious, a young seismologist compared the timestamps with the latest satellite images of the botanical sanctuary. As the data aligned, a chill spread through the room. Every time the gravity plants rearranged themselves, a seismic pulse followed within seconds. It wasn't a coincidence. Somehow the garden and the planet were moving together. Elias felt the change before he heard it. The glowing garden turned toward the eastern mountains as the earth released a gentle pulse. Across the world, the same rhythm echoed. The garden wasn't sending a message. It was answering one. Within hours, samples from the sanctuary arrived at the world's most advanced biological research facility. Every precaution was taken. The gravity plants were sealed inside sterile chambers, protected from contamination, and examined with instruments capable of reading life at the molecular level. At first, everything appeared ordinary. The cells contained chlorophyll, absorbed water, and even performed photosynthesis. But when researchers attempted to sequence their DNA, the computers froze. The genetic code didn't match a single known organism on Earth. It wasn't damaged. It simply didn't belong in any biological database ever created. One researcher refused to accept the impossible. Instead of comparing the sequence to Earth's genetic database, she converted the molecular code into a visual pattern. As the projection expanded across the laboratory wall, silence filled the room. The spirals, angles, and repeating structures were identical to the giant symbols forming inside the sanctuary. The plants weren't just growing according to their DNA. Their DNA was the blueprint for the entire garden, and hidden within that blueprint was a mathematical language unlike anything found in nature. In that moment, the conclusion became unavoidable. These plants had never evolved on Earth. They had been planted here by someone who understood the planet long before humanity ever did. Guided by the strange patterns, Elias entered a hidden chamber beneath the sanctuary. Ancient walls were covered with glowing symbols, the same symbols the plants had been drawing from above for thousands of years. At the chamber's center, a crystal map of Earth began to glow. The symbols aligned with the planet's tectonic plates. Elias finally understood. The sanctuary wasn't a garden. It was Earth's ancient control system. Scientists first believed the patterns were signals meant for distant stars, but after months of analysis, one fact became impossible to ignore. Every transmission was directed inward, toward the Earth itself. Then the final model was complete. The sanctuary wasn't sending a message across the universe. It was communicating with the planet's hidden network, as if Earth itself could listen. As the final pattern locked into place, every gravity plant stopped moving. Then, across the planet, dormant fault lines released a single, gentle pulse, like the steady heartbeat of a living world. Elias closed his eyes and smiled. The sanctuary had never been calling for help. It had been awakening the planet, and somewhere beneath humanity's feet, Earth had finally answered. The wave released by the sanctuary didn't stop at the valley. It raced silently beneath every continent, traveling through the Earth's mantle like a pulse through a living body. Strangely, there were no violent earthquakes, no erupting volcanoes, and no towering tsunamis. On the surface, the world appeared perfectly calm. But far below, hidden beneath layers of ancient rock, enormous crystalline structures that had slept for thousands of years slowly began to awaken, glowing brighter with every passing second. Within minutes, satellites detected strange flashes appearing across the globe. Hidden beneath deserts, deep inside frozen mountains, and below dense rainforests, ancient monuments began to glow with the same blue light as the sanctuary. Built by unknown hands long before recorded history, these forgotten structures were awakening together, as if responding to a single command sent from the heart of the planet itself. As more ancient sites awakened, scientists overlaid their locations onto a global map. One by one, glowing points appeared across every continent. Then, the impossible became clear. None of the monuments were randomly placed. Together, they formed a vast planetary network, stretching across Earth like the veins of a living organism. Back at the sanctuary, Elias activated the ancient crystal map once more. This time, new symbols appeared beneath the glowing continents. They weren't words. They were instructions. The network wasn't built to communicate between civilizations. It was designed to stabilize the planet itself whenever Earth's balance was threatened. Deep within the chamber, Elias uncovered one final stone tablet hidden behind the crystal map. Unlike the others, its symbols slowly rearranged themselves into a language he could understand. It revealed a chilling truth. The network had never awakened by accident. It activated only when the planet detected an approaching global threat. At that same moment, satellites detected an enormous object drifting silently beyond the moon's orbit. It emitted no radio signals and reflected almost no sunlight. Yet its path pointed directly toward Earth. The sanctuary hadn't awakened because of humanity. It had awakened because something was coming. As the crystal map grew brighter, a hidden recording suddenly activated. It wasn't written text or a radio signal, but a lifelike hologram. A tall, peaceful being appeared before Elias. It introduced itself as one of the original caretakers, the civilization that had planted the gravity garden on Earth 8,000 years ago. The hologram revealed the sanctuary's final purpose. It was never built to save humanity. It was built to protect the living planet. If Earth ever faced a cosmic threat beyond its own defenses, the gardens would awaken together and activate a planetary shield hidden beneath the crust. The hologram's voice grew quieter. The planetary shield required an enormous source of energy. Once activated, every gravity plant on Earth would release its life force at the same moment. The sanctuaries would survive only as silent ruins, their purpose fulfilled forever. Elias looked back at the living garden that had been his home for 60 years. Every floating flower, every glowing vine, every impossible tree had been protecting Earth all along. Without hesitation, he reached toward the crystal and whispered, "If this world must live, let the garden rest." Elias placed his hand upon the ancient crystal. Across the planet, every gravity garden answered at once. Millions of floating flowers released streams of brilliant light into the sky. The energy merged high above Earth, unfolding into a shimmering shield that wrapped gently around the entire planet. Then, the mysterious object approaching from deep space simply slowed, turned away, and disappeared into the darkness. As dawn broke, the sanctuary was silent. The floating flowers had settled gently onto the Earth for the very first time. Their glow had faded, but life continued to bloom around them. Elias smiled, knowing the garden had fulfilled its purpose. It had never existed to defy gravity. It had existed to remind humanity that the greatest protector of Earth had always been the planet itself. Some believed the sanctuary was a miracle. Others called it a mystery. But perhaps it was neither. Perhaps it was a promise that when humanity learns to protect its world, the world will always find a way to protect us in return.